What takes down a $35 million radar complex? Firepower or a lie? In thick fog, decoy bobbers detonated small warheads and flew like migratory birds, baiting Russian operators into a split-second misread. Then, a ghost bobber stitched a private AI mesh through a jamming bubble and flipped the board. Keep watching to see how that deception unlocked a precision strike that erased Serapole's command center and a fuel depot, created a regional seismic blip, and left thousands displaced from a shattered supply chain, without a single artillery battery firing. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thick fog. 5 dots creep in low. On the scope, they wobble like geese. The crew shrugs, shifts coffee mugs, and keeps scanning. They don't see a kill chain forming at 40 feet above the ground. 4 bobbers push noise, 1 leads. The alpha ghost bobber carries the brains, not a big warhead. Its job is to manage how the swarm looks to hostile sensors and to pull threads in the air defense picture without firing a single battery. The decoys soak attention and sow errors. The ghost shapes the signature spread, broadcasts a phantom track when needed, and keeps the team together in the mud of the spectrum. The goal isn't a strike yet. It's exposure. Force the network to show which nodes react, which stay quiet, and who coordinates when stress hits. Russian electronic warfare spins up and throws a Kasuka 4 bubble over the lane. The decoys lose Starlink and wobble. To operators, several tracks smear, slow, and split. Migratory clutter is a known headache, and these returns look messy enough to be birds in a thermal inversion. The fog is thick, the altitude is crawl low, and the velocity is inconsistent by design. The crew marks low priority and waits for a reason to engage. So the swarm hands them one. A decoy performs a controlled splash. A small onboard charge pops, producing a clean flash and a brief thermal spike. That forces a reclassify. The rest immediately drag their radar cross-sections and ground speeds toward bird-like patterns. Irregular headings, shallow arcs, and non-threatening speeds. They remain on the edge of attention, never quite sharp, always slightly off. Modern ground radars and systems in the Zoo Park 1M class use Doppler-based filters and micro-Doppler cues to strip out birds. Wing beat modulations, low radial speeds, and erratic headings usually mean clutter. Fog and thermal gradients complicate that logic. Layers bend energy, smear returns, and reduce contrast between small UAVs and fauna. Under jamming, operators run higher thresholds and spend more time validating suspicious tracks. Workload rises, checklists drag, and confirmation bias creeps in. If it looks like birds under a jam, it can be filed like birds. That bias saves missiles but opens a door. The ghost bobber flips roles. Recon turns remote pilot. It builds a skinny, private mesh, a short hop link that rides under the main jam and reanimates the decoys that looked dead. Control pings stitch across the bubble. To the Russian screens, the paradox grows. Jammed links should drop and stay dropped, yet the dots regain coherence and change behavior inside the denial zone. Now the sensor picture fractures. Some nodes report nothing. Others flag non-threat birds. The mesh, however, holds a stable, low-latency picture of all 5 drones. That mismatch creates a timing window to poke NABOM's fire control logic. Track association begins to stumble. The system tries to fuse split-quality inputs and assigns confidence poorly. The ghost slides one decoy into a sector with partial coverage, then another into a node with delayed reporting. A cascading error forms when the Panzer S2 engagement computer splits identities and misprioritizes. One track inherits a bird label but moves like a weapon for 2 sweeps. Another track, actually a decoy, receives outsized threat weight because its return stabilizes after the mesh correction. The gunner watches a scope salted with noise and snow as the Kasuka pushes high power. Thermal optics show fast movers, but their count doesn't match the radar. The decoys force the misread. The sacrifice splash exposes emitter timing and scan behavior. The ghost bobber uses those tells to steer survivors through the seams and stress the radar until its operating mode shows. With that logic exposed and the EW lane bent out of shape, The board finally looks the way they wanted. A blind spot opening just wide enough for the next actor already waiting offshore. If the drones weren't the main event, what needed the blindfold? A precision strike aimed past the antenna, to the nerves and the fuel. The swarm's job was to make operators trust the wrong cues. Once the feed bent out of shape and the logic stuttered, the door swung open for the strike package that never showed on the first look. The target wasn't the spinning dish. It was the command loop in Serapole and the 840-ton diesel stash that kept vehicles, generators, and radar farms breathing. Hit the nerve and the blood. Missiles care less about a dish if the hands and the supply lines go dark. The operational logic ran simple and cold. Deception degraded the electronic picture and burned time. Nodes that should have shared clean tracks started sending mixed flags. While crews hunted ghosts and birds, a guided strike crept into range. The aim point list led with the command building tied to NEBO-M's reporting chain, followed by the air defense coordination racks that cued interceptors across the sector. A separate aim point marked the diesel depot. Heavy tanks, feeder pipes, and pumping stations that moved fuel to multiple brigades. One feeds decisions, one feeds motion. Take both, and the sector slows to a crawl. Here's the timing trap. The ATAC-MS flight waited just outside reliable detection, banking on the NEBO-M to commit to a flawed picture created by the earlier misreads. Interceptors cycled after chasing false priorities. Launch tubes that should have been cold ran hot, then needed a reset. When the engagement algorithm tagged the wrong track, a short guidance window opened. The missile exploited the gap, used terrain to mask approach, and let the radar believe it had time to reassess. It didn't. The target set was layered. Command nodes housed the data links that funneled NEBO-M's track files to sector leaders. Coordination racks bridged radar returns to shooter batteries and assigned threat weights across the net. Nearby sat the heavy fuel depot, a central pool that filled trucks feeding air defense generators, mobile radars, and logistics convoys. Fuel plus command forms systemic risk because both raise readiness across units. Remove either and crews can adapt. Remove both and adaptation slows, spreads, and drains morale. Compromised EW environments increase missile survival because every handoff adds delay when logic is overloaded. Dispersed sensors don't snap back after a fusion stumble. They need fresh cycles, clean tracks, and human confirmation. That lag is costly. Economics mattered too. A swarm that costs around $1 million can bend an air defense picture long enough to enable a missile strike worth tens of millions in effects, especially when the payoff is a chain reaction that denies power, fuel, and command. At the impact point, the warhead did specialized work. A 200-kilogram shaped charge uses the Monroe effect to form a high-velocity jet that bores into hardened sections like rack rooms or bunker entries. The follow-on blast, not the jet, wrecks cables, racks, and power trunks. In the fuel yard, a secondary ignition climbs fast. Diesel doesn't flash like gasoline, but heated tanks, venting vapor, and pressure relief failures produce violent boilover. Fire rolls across berms, and fragmentation from lids and piping seals the damage. An 80-foot fireball and a small seismic blip become plausible when multiple tanks overpressure and structures fail in quick sequence. The twist sat in plain sight. The goal wasn't to snap the radar dish, but to rip out the coordination hub and the fuel resilience that kept the grid alive. With staff displaced and the depot chain broken, brigades pulled back to safer sites. Coverage narrowed. Crews, unsure of their scopes after the deception, second-guessed every track that clustered near ground clutter. So the unbreakable radar didn't only falter, it guided its network into a self-exposure that cleared the way for a single strike to wipe a nerve center and freeze supply lines without guns or tubes. Step back from the fireball. This points to a doctrinal risk for any force betting on concentrated, high-value air defense nodes. The real win wasn't the blast. It was forcing a modern air defense brain to pick the wrong path, then punishing that choice with timing, geometry, and a fuel-fed chain reaction. That's the lever. Decision pressure under electronic stress.